the story of redemption, temptation, and fall. Satan assumes the form of a serpent and enters Eden. The serpent was a beautiful creature with wings, and while flying through the air, her appearance was bright, resembling burnished gold. She did not go upon the ground, but went from place to place through the air and ate fruit like man. Satan entered into the serpent and took its position in the tree of knowledge and commenced leisurely eating of the fruit. Eve, unconsciously at first, separated from her husband in her employment. When she became aware of the fact, she felt that there might be danger. But again, she thought herself secure, even if she did not remain close by the side of her husband. She had wisdom and strength to know if evil came, and to meet it. This the angels had cautioned her not to do. Eve found herself gazing with mingled curiosity and admiration upon the fruit of the forbidden tree. She saw it was very lovely, and was reasoning with herself why God had so decidedly prohibited their eating or touching it. Now was Satan's opportunity. She addressed her as though she was able to divine her thought. "Yea, have God," Christ said, "you shall not eat of every tree of the garden." Therefore, with soft and pleasant words, and with musical voice, she addressed the wondering Eve. She was startled to hear a serpent speak. She extolled her beauty and exceeding loveliness, which was not displeasing to Eve, but she was amazed, for she knew that to the serpent God, Christ had not given the power of speech. Eve's curiosity was aroused. Instead of fleeing from the spot, she listened to hear a serpent talk. It did not occur to her mind that it might be that fallen Satan, using the serpent as a medium. It was Satan that spoke, not the serpent. Eve was beguiled, flattered, infatuated. Had she met a commanding personage, possessing a form like the angels and resembling them, she would have been upon her guard. But that strange voice should have driven her to her husband's side to inquire of him why another should therefore freely address her. But she entered into a discussion with the serpent. She answered the question, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God, Christ, hath said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, or you die." The serpent answered, "You shall not surely die. For God Christ do know that in the day you eat of that, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Satan would convey the idea that by eating of the forbidden tree, they would receive a new and more noble kind of knowledge than they had hitherto attained. This has been her special work, with great success, ever since her fault to lead men too closely into the secrets of the Almighty, and not to be satisfied with what God Christ has revealed, and not careful to obey that which she has commanded. She would lead them to disobey God's commands, and then make them believe that they are entering a wonderful field of knowledge. This is purely supposition and a miserable deception. They fail to understand what God Christ has revealed, and disregard her explicit commandments and aspire after wisdom, independent of God Christ, and seek to understand that which she has been pleased to withhold from mortals. They are overjoyed with their ideas of progression and charmed with their own vain philosophy, but grope to feel around. In midnight darkness, relative to true knowledge, they are ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. It was not the will of God Christ that this sinless pair should have any knowledge of evil. She had freely given them the good, but withheld the evil. Eve thought the words of the serpent wise, and she received the broad assertion, "You shall not surely die. For God Christ do know that in the day you eat of that, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil, making God Christ a liar." Satan boldly suggesting that God Christ had deceived them to keep them from being exalted in knowledge, equal with herself. God Christ said, "If you eat, you shall surely die." The serpent said, "If you eat, you shall not surely die." The tempter assured Eve that as soon as she ate of the fruit, she would receive a new and superior knowledge that would make her equal with God Christ. She called her attention to herself. She ate freely of the tree and found it not only perfectly harmless, but delicious and exhilarating, and told her that it was because of its wonderful properties to impart wisdom and power that God, Christ, had prohibited them from tasting or even touching it, for she knew its wonderful qualities. She stated that her eating of the fruit of the tree forbidden to them was the reason she had attained the power of speech. She intimated that God, Christ, would not carry out her word. It was merely a threat to intimidate them and keep them from great good. She further told them that they could not die, had they not eaten of the tree of life, which perpetuates immortality. She said that God, Christ, was deceiving them to keep them from a higher state of felicity and more exalted happiness. The tempter Satan plucked the fruit and passed it to Eve. She took it in her hand. "Now," said the tempter Satan, "you were prohibited from even touching fear that you die." She told Eve that she would realize no more sense of evil and death in eating than in touching or handling the fruit. Eve was emboldened, because she felt not the immediate signs of God's disapproval. She thought the words of the tempter all wise and correct. She ate and was delighted with the fruit. It seemed delicious to her taste, and she imagined that she realized in herself the wonderful effects of the fruit. Eve becomes a tempter. She then plucked for herself of the fruit and ate, and imagined she felt the quickening power of a new and elevated existence as the result of the exhilarating influence of the forbidden fruit. She was in a strange and unnatural excitement as she sought her husband with her hands filled with the forbidden fruit. She related to him the wise discourse of the serpent, and wished to conduct him at once to the tree of knowledge. She told Adam she had eaten of the fruit, and instead of her feeling any sense of death, she realized a pleasing, exhilarating influence. As soon as Eve had disobeyed, she became a powerful medium through which to occasion the fall of her husband. I saw a sadness come over the countenance of Adam. He appeared afraid and astonished. A struggle appeared to be going on in his mind. He told Eve he was quite certain that this was the fallen Satan that they had been warned against, and if so, that she must die. She assured him she felt no ill effects, but rather a very pleasant influence, and entreated him to eat. Adam quite well understood that his companion had transgressed the only prohibition laid upon them as a test of their fidelity and love. Eve reasoned that the serpent said they should not surely die, and serpent words must be true, for she felt no signs of God's displeasure, but a pleasant influence, as she imagined the angels felt. Adam regretted that Eve had left his side, but now the deed was done. He must be separated from her, whose society he had loved so well. How could he have it, therefore? His love for Eve was strong, and in utter discouragement he resolved to share her fate. He reasoned that Eve was a part of himself, and if she must die, he would die with her, for he could not bear the thought of separation from her. He lacked faith in his merciful and benevolent Creator Christ. He did not think that God, Christ, who had formed him out of the dust of the ground into a living, beautiful form, and had created Eve to be his companion, could supply her place. After all, might not the words of this wise serpent be correct? Eve was before him, just as lovely and beautiful, and apparently as innocent as before this act of disobedience. She expressed greater, higher love for him than before her disobedience, as the effects of the fruit she had eaten. He saw in her no signs of death. She had told him of the happy influence of the fruit, of her ardent love for him, and he decided to brave the consequences. He seized the fruit and quickly ate it, and like Eve, felt not immediately its ill effects. Eve had thought herself capable of deciding between right and wrong. The flattering hope of entering a higher state of knowledge had led her to think that the serpent was her especial friend, possessing a great interest in her welfare. Had she sought her husband, and they had related to their Maker Christ the words of the serpent, they would have been delivered at once from his artful temptation. The Lord Christ would not have them investigate the fruit of the tree of knowledge, for then they would be exposed to Satan masked. He knew that they would be perfectly safe if they touched not the fruit,